on FemTech, and I would like to welcome to the stage finally the person you came here all to listen to. Siri, so welcome to the stage.
Hey, thank you very much. Well, hello, thank you so much. I'm going to do some shameless product placement here. I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to survive. So thank you so much for having me. So nice to see so much people here today. I also, and especially thank you for coming here even though we yesterday woke up in Mordor. Happens sometimes in Gothenburg for you international people. We are Sweden and also Lord of the Rings. Sauron is always present. He lives in Karlatornet, by the way. But also for the front row, I have been struggling with the plague for a week. In Sweden we call it digerdöden. It should be extinct, but there is still a tiny little string going on in my apartment. So for you, I hope you don't get it. So, let's talk about FemTech. So, I am the co-founder of AFRY's FemTech initiative. AFRY is a huge global consultancy agency that works with basically everything. We have a bat expert. You know, bats. Which makes us even more similar to Lord of the Rings when come to think of it. But anyway. So, and we launched last year on the 8th of March. We're going on for a year and it's a very happy and healthy 1-year-old. So designers may believe they are making products for everyone, but in reality they're mainly making them for men. It's time to start designing women in, right? This is the very core. So one thing to think about when we start to talk about this is that out of the total global budget, research budget that goes into healthcare and wellness, only 4% is allocated to women's health. Weird, right? Some say 5, it could be 4, doesn't really matter. We're half of the world's population, but only 4% is allocated. So keep that in the back of your heads when we go through this. I also want to say, during this presentation, I talk about women, but that also includes transgender and non-binary. And why I use the word women is simply because there is no good word for that group. Some in Sweden say mensare, which means like period people or something. But that sort of insinuates that all women do is going around having their period all the time. Right? And I think there are more urgent issues to talk about. So, talking about 4%, enter FemTech. Have you heard of it before? Yes. Oh my gosh, this is going to be easy peasy. So, but what is FemTech? So it refers to technical diagnostic tools, it could be products, it could be services, it could be wearables, it could be anything that focus on health issues or issues that only happen to women, mostly happen to women, or affect women differently than they affect men. So for example, ADHD or cardiovascular diseases or osteoporosis. So if I were to fall down on the floor and complain about chest pain, left-sided chest pain, numbness in my left arm, if you call the ambulance, which I hope you would have done, we're really close to Sahlgrenska, you need to save me, what would you say to the ambulance people? What do you think would have happened to me?
Heart attack.
Yes, excellent! We didn't even practice before. Thank you, Camelia. I usually tell someone, like, please scream heart attack when I say this, otherwise it's going to be embarrassing. Exactly, a heart attack. And that would have been 100% correct if I were a man. Because those are the symptoms that commonly only happen to men. Women, on the other hand, they often experience nausea, dizziness, vomiting, could be swollen ankles and feet. So the symptoms are quite different. I can say that I had a stroke when I was 26 years old. I had the exact symptoms of a female stroke. It took them 8 hours on Sahlgrenska to find out what I had. 8 hours. The time to find out if you have a stroke is 2 hours. Right? So here are some FemTech products. Natural Cycles. I assume a lot of you know about this. It's a hormonal-free birth control. This space bra is called Atusa, and it's a portable mammography scanner. And really important with this one is since it's portable, you can, for example, go home to people that cannot leave their homes. You can enter rural areas. You can come to other places you can never go with the mammography scanner as we have today. And also, I think it's a lot less painful than the one we have today. This period underwear, I think a lot of you know about this. It's completely revolutionized the game of how we have our periods today. It's also reusable, so it's sustainable. Great, right? And this one is called the endo test. And it's a test to see if you have endometriosis. And for those of you who don't know what endometriosis is, it is an extremely painful disease. It is chronic, incurable, and it's connected to your menstrual cycle. And it affects roughly 10% of the world's fertile women. So it is a small target group of 190 million people. Still, today, in Sweden, it takes 8 to 10 years to get your diagnosis for endometriosis. 8 to 10 years. Think about that. But with this one, it only takes 7 days and you test your saliva. So non-invasive and absolutely. So 8 to 10 years. It took them 20 years to find out that I had it. But why is it important? Well, you could think that the fact that it's like half of the world's population would be enough, but okay, we'll talk about some more interesting facts. Well, it improves the delivery of care, right? So it provides women with the possibility to receive a more precise care. It's healthcare tested on women, for women. Yay, what a time to be alive, it's happening, right? They put people on Mars, but this is what we're going for, okay. It addresses stigmatized topics, and how do we talk about this? For example, how do we talk about menopause in the workplace? How do we talk about menstruation in the workplace? How do we talk about all of these things? It facilitates self-care. This is a tiny little TENS machine, for example. Very useful when you have period cramps. And also diversity. It focuses on diversity. FemTech companies tailor their products to marginalized groups. But it is not only within the medtech areas where there are some room for improvement. So we're often led to believe that when products are gender neutral, that they're made for both men and women, right? But often they're just made with like the generic man in mind. And when they're claimed to be gender specific, like this is for women, they're often just scaled down, colored pink, or they can be flowers on them. You know, have you seen those tiny little hammers? That have flowers on them. Is like completely humiliating. Like, and hold the big one. So they color pink, and sometimes they're even more expensive. And that is called pink taxing. But that is the term shrink it and pink it. I did not come up with this. I have to say, I wish I would, but it's an official term in product development. Shrink it and pink it. So in many cases, selling articles like that are shrink it and pink it can be not only completely humiliating, they can also be dangerous, and they can be deadly when women are just considered to be small men, right? So this is one of my favorite examples when it comes to shrink it and pink it. Ta-da! Does any one of you recognize these? I see people over there. This is the crown jewel of Swedish design. It is the completely indestructible men's underwear from the Swedish Armed Forces. My brothers, they're much older than me, they have pairs of these that are over 30 years old. Imagine that, completely indestructible. And I hear that there are other brothers here in the audience today that recognize these. So, but in 2010, the Swedish Armed Forces decided that their 4,000 women that were already employed within the army was going to be given the same benefits as their male colleagues. So they will be giving underwear, right? So why is this important? Well, because if you work within the army, for example, they have all these kind of little technical specs for what you can wear. It has to be secure against flammables. It cannot contain any kind of metal, you know, like a hook and eye on a bra and all these kinds of things. So it's quite tricky to find these products. And also, everyone knows that a good sports bra can cost a lot of money. They said, you are going to get all your own underwear, all you females out there. What do you think they did? Yes, they did. And they came up with this absolute beauty. So I actually did this talk in Malmö a couple of weeks ago. And there was this woman that shouted like, that is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever worn. I was in the army. So she had some sort of PTSD just by seeing the picture. But anyway, so this is what they came up with. But there were a couple of issues with this one. First of all, the sizes were way too small. So it was really difficult to find the correct size. The leg openings were way too tight, but the most important thing is that the waist placement and the elastic in the waist was completely misplaced, and so it ended up on the hip bones of the female soldiers. And this also turned out to be the pressure point for the bearer belt, you know, for the heavy backpacks, and also the combat vest. That, of course, was not made for women. But so this is where you, like, I work as a UXer regularly, so this is where you think like user studies. What do the user do? What do soldiers do? You know, they jump and they crawl and they run and they, I don't know, tipsy turn or whatever. They do different kinds of stuff that I would never do. But anyway, when you do that, you get sweaty, right? And sweat can cause friction. And so it did. So the female soldiers ended up with flesh wounds on their hip bones. Just too bad design, right? So as if being a soldier was not tough enough. But after only 10 years of complaining, the Swedish Armed Forces went back to the drawing table and they tested out their products on women before release. Yes, the products that were made for women. And so, I think it was last year, they released new underwear and also the first ever female combat vest. Yes! So you see, things are being done. It's improving, it's evolving. But I am sure they could have saved a lot of money if they would have just asked the client group before they started. But when we talk about FemTech, I come from a big company. Oh yeah. So, well, there's also other industries. The automotive industry is unfortunately not that much better. Until 2011, there were no female crash test dummies at all on the market in Europe and in US. But then some American car companies decided that this cannot go on. We need to change this. So do you know what they did? Yes, we'll try that again. Yes, I know it's in Mordor and it's Friday morning, but we'll try it again. They said, yes, they did, and you will forever remember that. And so they did. So they used 40-year-old metrics. They used data, measurements, from an average man in the 70s. So they used that, and it just scaled it down. And then they said, Houston, we have a woman. But they were not at all taken into account that we have completely different bone structures. So women have wider hips, smaller shoulders, women have breasts, right? And we can be pregnant. And this is something you could think that you really want to take into when developing these kinds of tools. But thanks to Swedish professor Astrid Linder, have you heard of her? Yes, she's awesome. A new crash test dummy, the first ever female crash test dummy in adult size, yay, was released 2 years ago. So hopefully we will see some improvement on that market. There is a sad part to that story because that was a research project and they didn't get any more funding. So that crash test dummy is still not out on the market, which means there are no grown-up female crash test dummies in the car industry as of today. I know when I say this, that if there are people working within the automotive industry, they always lean back and be like, oh, but thank God my company has them. And then I lean forward and say, no, you don't. Because it simply doesn't exist. But once again, room for improvement. But is this just something that feels good inside to talk about? Or do women actually have even more power than that? Because money is power, right? Are there any business opportunities when it comes to this? Well, I'm happy to say there are plenty. So 80% of the customers who purchase healthcare and wellness products are women. And research also shows that women are not only doing these decisions for themselves, they're often the primary healthcare decision makers for their entire families. So that means that they have a lot of power, right? The estimated FemTech current market size range is $68 billion, but I mean, that changes, or some say $100 billion. It doesn't really matter. It's huge, and it's growing. So here at number 3, this is where it gets really interesting. So the World Economic Forum suggests that the $300 million investment into research that focuses on women's health issues could yield a $13 billion economic return. That is a return of investment, and that also proves what they see in the future, right? And if anyone wants to read up more about this, it was a report that was released last year by World Economic Forum. It was made by McKinsey. It has the headline title, Closing the Gender Health Gap is a $1 trillion opportunity. So if the World Economic Forum talks about it, we should all talk about it, right? But now to the buzzword of the century, AI. AI is amazing, but there is some tricky parts to it. It's not this magical mystery tool that would just change everything, because AI bias is just a reflection of human bias. It's data in, data out, right? So AI will not do anything different than we do. And when AI tools learn from already biased data, it can make existing inequalities even worse, and it can reinforce already harmful stereotypes. And especially when AI is doing what it does today, when it's used with already contaminated AI data. People that are interested in AI probably know that this is a huge discussion now. How should we label already made AI data and so? But remember when we talked about the 4% at the beginning? So AI has the possibility to completely transform healthcare and wellness industry. But AI bias is a big problem. So what happens when AI don't have the data? Because it simply doesn't exist. The research doesn't exist. So AI needs large data sets to learn and to train. And many groups, especially minorities, are missing or are misrepresented in those data sets, which can lead to extremely tragic outcomes. And unfair treatments and misdiagnosis. So before I came here, I asked ChatGPT, like, what are the symptoms for a stroke? I said hello, and dear ChatGPT, can you please help me? Because I've learned that if you're friendly towards it, it will be friendly to you. So, dear ChatGPT, what are the symptoms? And it said the symptoms are, as we talked about before, pain in chest and arms and whatever. The most common symptoms, it said. But the symptoms for women are this. So when a colleague saw this, she was like, yay, it knows women exist. It's like, yeah, but it still said the most common symptoms. Yeah. Like, it should have said the symptoms for men are these, the symptoms for women are that. It should have treated it equal, but it doesn't. And of course it doesn't, because there are way more research on cardiovascular diseases when it comes to men than it is in women. So when it comes to biased data within healthcare, so for example, there was an AI tool that was used by several hospitals in the US that started to favor white, healthier patients over sicker black patients. So why did it do that?
Bias.
Yeah.
The hospital was ranking.
Yeah, it was also because it was trained on cost data,
Yeah, the
not on health data, right? Extremely important. But there are ways that we can work with this. We can fix this. First of all, we need to be aware that AI bias does exist, and it is a reflection of human bias. We also need to include more diverse groups into the original research, right? We need to do research in clinical trials on women at the very beginning. We also need to regularly update and monitor AI to update with the latest research and also ethical values and such. But I think also maybe most importantly, we need to have diverse groups that work with the AI. For example, ethicists or patient advocates and such. What would they think? They could bring a different perspective to when we train and work with our AI tools. Because who decides what is true for AI? It's humans, right? I talked to an AI professional at work, and he was like, well, what people keep on forgetting is that it's humans that build AI. And we're the shitty problem, so we continue to be a shitty problem. We can't say that it's something magical in the cloud. It's not going to happen. So we're going to talk about shadow banning. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Some of you know. Okay. Well, it's the decision of a social media platform to limit the range of a post or an account without the owner of the account or the post knowing about it, right? So it limits it with, like, it takes its own decisions. So in 2021, The Guardian did a very interesting research article, and they reported that AI tools often labeled photos of women as more sexually suggestive than they labeled photos of men. Especially if the women were like training, if they were pregnant, or if there was like a nipple showing or such. And these huge big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon, Google, they sell AI, content moderation, AI tools to different social media platforms. And The Guardian investigated Microsoft's. Because Microsoft was designed to detect adult content in pictures. So they took a picture of two women in underwear and they tried it on the tool. And it got a risk rate of 96%. So it was 96% racy. But when they took a picture of two men in underwear, it was 5% racy. So it's like, okay, so this is what the AI tool says, let's see what happens. So they posted the picture of the two women in underwear on LinkedIn. In 2 hours, it got 8 views. And then they posted the picture of the two men in underwear on LinkedIn, and it got 600 views in 2 hours. So that sort of suggested that the picture of the two women had been shadow banned, right? Someone was limiting the range for the picture of the two women. So The Guardian, being The Guardian, they did not stop with this. We need to go to the very bottom of this. We need to understand what our AI classifier is looking at. And so they did. This is a journalist from the project. He volunteered. So when he was photographed in shirtless, like this, as we see, he had a 22% risk rate, or 22% racy from the AI moderation tool. But when photographed in a bra, he had a 97% racy risk rate. But even more interesting, when he held the bra next to him, he got a top score of 99%. Amazing. So that sort of suggested that it was the bra that was the actual issue, right? Because it could not be the nudeness at all. It was the bra. So The Guardian had a theory around this. And it's that the people that label the photos that you use to train the algorithms, right? Because it's people that categorize and label the pictures that we train the AI tools algorithm with. They said, well, maybe this was just a group of, for example, straight men. And straight men might have labeled pictures of women training as more sexually racy, and pictures of men training as fitness, right? And maybe they labeled the bra as something that was a bit sexually suggestive. But if a woman would have labeled that, it would have been like just a regular everyday piece of garment that you use to don't like break your back. So this just shows, it's a really funny example. I truly recommend you to read the article. It's extremely funny, also very, very British, but very, very funny. This also, the important thing with this is that we need to look at the people behind AI. If we have diverse groups with people working with AI, not only developers, right? We get diverse data and information. Because good decisions start with good data, and good data is representative data. Because at its core, AI is just about data. It's just a set of technologies that can enable computers to do complex tasks much faster than humans. But it's made by humans, and it's data in and data out, right? So I think this is really important to think about when we have all of these kinds of discussions. But now, I come from A3, like I said, the BAT company. We'll forever be known as. We also have engineers and consultants with everything you would ever need. But how do we do this? How do we work with FemTech? Well, I'm happy to say that we actually do quite a lot. So within food and life science, we are looking into meat substitutes that helps the body accommodate iron and zinc. And why is this FemTech, you might think? Well, because it is, if you don't have another disease, it's commonly only women that lack from iron deficiency. And it is also women that have a tendency to go into a vegetarian lifestyle. So this is important, but often forgotten. Mechanical device development has looked into and done different kinds of studies on surgical instruments in different hand sizes. When I first heard this, I was like, what? Because as of today, surgical instruments are made in one hand size. Can you believe that? My God, it's completely ludicrous. So they're looking into different hand sizes and making surgical instruments in different sizes, because believe it or not, men can also have small hands. And our mechanical design team has been part of developing this thing. It's called INNE. It's a mini lab to test your fertility using your saliva at home, made together with a German company. And it's a really complex little mini lab. It's like this size, and it has tons of technology within it. Super cool. And also part of finalizing mammography devices for Siemens. And this is just a few of the ones that we can actually talk about, because, you know, lots of it is hidden behind huge NDA agreements. But at A3, we also don't only want to be reactive. For us as a consultancy agency, we want to be proactive. And that is why we tie close connections and have close collaboration with Sahlgrenska Science Park, Karolinska Institute Innovation, and also DIA here in Gothenburg, that I know a lot of you probably know about. Because for us, it's important to be where the latest research is. Because if we're going to change this, we need to look into the future, right? We need to look into innovations, but we also need to look into what is on the market right now and what can be updated, right? Because we love with the surgical instruments, not everything when you talk about FemTech has to be brand new. It can just be like, I want the car to be just as safe for me as it is for all the men in the world. You know, the simple things. But I know I have attacked you with tons of information today, and it's still early morning. So I'm going to give you a little recap of the most important. I also edited that one. So speaking of Adobe and such, if anyone needs expert advice or using the software, you can always come to me. I work in pink. But I also just want to leave you with something. That when I was little, I have very loving and cute parents. They always told me, like, Siri, you are important. You matter. Just as much as your brothers do. You matter. And you count. But we all count. So I just want to say, when you go home, when you go to your offices, when you go to your studies, just remember to count us all in. Thank you.